Okay, it being 6 o'clock, I'll call to meeting this February 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Select Board and notify everybody that Chelmsford Telemedia is broadcasting it live and recording it for later viewing by the public. So if you would join me in a Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, born and unborn.
Thank you. So first up this evening, we have Jen Benson, Antron Watson, Fred Brousseau, and Deb Sirianni, along with some other guests I see, to make a presentation.
Is Pat on Zoom?
No, he's-
Madam Chair,
Where'd it go?
members of the board, Town Manager Cohen, I'm Fred Brousseau. I co-chair the Age-Friendly Chelmsford Implementation Committee, and I'm here tonight with co-chair Debbie Sirianni and John Bowles, who's a member of the committee. We're honored this evening also to be joined by Jennifer Benson, who's the AARP Massachusetts State Director, and Antron Watson, who is the AARP Massachusetts Age-Friendly Director. Thank you both for coming. We appreciate the opportunity to present to the town an AARP that recognizes a significant milestone for our committee, and allow me to present just a brief timeline just for context. In July of 2019, Chelmsford was awarded a 5-year membership in AARP's network of age-friendly communities and states. Our age-friendly planning team, we assessed the town's age-friendly needs and prepared an action plan to address those needs. In March of 2021, we submitted our action plan that was approved by the town and subsequently by AARP. In May of 2021, our Age-Friendly Implementation Committee was formed to implement the action items in the action plan. As per AARP request, we recently prepared and submitted to AARP our 5-year progress report that summarizes the progress that we made over the last 3 fiscal years. With strong support from town officials, town staff, residents, and business partners, our committee has implemented, as described in the progress report, several age-friendly services and projects for 7 domains: housing, transportation, community supports and health services, outdoor spaces and buildings, social respect, participation and inclusion, civic engagement and employment and communication and information. It's been truly a town-wide team effort. The progress report was reviewed and approved by AARP, resulting in the renewal of our membership, which is reflected in this plaque. With that, we'd like to present this plaque to the town and again express our appreciation for their unwavering and enthusiastic support that our committee has received from the very beginning of our Age-Friendly Chelmsford initiative. We look forward now to continue to make Chelmsford even more age-friendly. So thank you. Any questions?
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. Thank you.
Okay.
That was loud.
Do you want us to come out front and take a picture?
We love it. And we also, yeah.
Yeah, you have to come too.
Who are you presenting it to?
Good, how are you? George, scooch in there. Just went to sleep.
Thank you so much.
You first?
Go ahead, George.
Okay, look at me.
You can do a selfie.
Yeah, he's over here doing selfies.
UPI.
Make me look skinny.
Congratulations. Thank you for all you're doing, Grace. Appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Great work.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, no, I was joking that acting because they're Here's like one, 204.
Okay.
Just say, it's pretty
Could we
funny.
get
Were you
a-
in acting?
Could we get more of that?
No,
in the picture?
I've lived in Hartford since
Oh,
95.
Harvard.
95, yeah. I was there in 2000.
I'll just stay up, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I just also do want to mention to the public, you notice a couple empty seats here. Select Board Member Pat Maloney could not make it this evening, and Select Board Member Aaron Drew is joining us by Zoom. So now Deb's going to update us on other great things at the Senior Center.
Thanks so much. I'll try to keep this brief. We were visited by Virginia and Paul, and we had a meeting with Fred Brousseau and also our COA board chair, Bob Schneider, and we met with, to discuss the goal of expanding inclusiveness at the Senior Center, which was discussed at a previous select board meeting. And so we ended up with two different meetings. We had a first discussion and then a follow-up. And after discussing it, Virginia made quite a comment, which was that she felt like we were already doing a lot to have a very inclusive center. So she wanted me to highlight some of the things that we've been doing at this meeting. So thanks for having me. So some of the considerations when we're talking, I mean, I think the first job we have every day at the Senior Center, and I tell all my staff this, I tell all my volunteers this, is we want to be welcoming. So if we can make somebody feel welcome at the Senior Center, that's our first job, and everything else is easier that way. You know, if they need something, then they know that they're welcome there and that we're there to help. So, you know, that's our first job. So some of the considerations we discussed was the use of the building for all ages to address loneliness and isolation among the population, to increase program options for more diverse residents, and the growing population of more diverse residents, attendance for men, attracting younger seniors, accessibility for all abilities, LGBTQ+, transportation, financially accessible programs, and mental health supports and caregiver support. So those were some of the things that we discussed during our meeting. First of all, how old do you have to be here to come to the Senior Center? A lot of people ask. And the answer is we don't card at the door. So we do have some programs that are only available to 60+, and that really includes the Senior Tax Worker Program. There's a limit for age, and our SHINE counseling, which is serving health insurance needs for everyone. So we have Medicare and Medicaid counseling to give people, kind of whittle down the options available for folks, and that's free counseling to let people know, and that's 65+. And then we have many programs for 60+ and disabled adults, including Meals on Wheels, if you're from Chelmsford. The transportation program is just for Chelmsford residents, or folks who are with our Social Day program registered. We have our nutrition program discounts for seniors, but then we also have the program open to others if they pay $4.50 for a meal. So we have Monday through Friday meals. We have the fitness room is limited to 60+ and disabled adults. The garden plot lottery, raised garden plots, the Social Day program and companion programs, and the LGBTQ plus social decided they wanted to be open for 45+. Other than that, really, many of the programs, most of what we have is an open building, and I don't card at the door. I encourage people to bring their family members, their disabled adults, children, their grandchildren, and unless we end up having some kind of wait list situation, I really feel like that's just a better way to approach it. So you can see all those other places, other programs that we have for many, many ages. So we also focus on intergenerational activities. Actually, we have people coming for everyday visits all the time. We have partnerships with Boy Scout troops and high school and middle school and elementary schools. We also have a lot of volunteer opportunities. We have lots of kids who come by and need service hours, so we place them, and they're a wonderful part of our community. We have a few events coming up just this coming vacation week. One is a game time at 1 o'clock on, I think it's the 20th is a Thursday, isn't it? Let's see. Is that a Thursday? So we're opening it up for people to bring their family members to play board games. And then we also have Gotta Dance Showcase from Gotta Dance Studio, and they do a presentation for us, and they come every year. So we're really excited to have them back, and those are open to the public as well. Another population that we were focused on to try to make sure that we were including special programs for is men. A lot of senior centers don't have a very high male population, so we've worked really hard to make sure that we focus on programs that are including them and encouraging them to be part of the community, including, well, they love the cafe. Some of the more popular things for men are painting class and pickleball clinics, the fitness room, the monthly veterans breakfast, playing in the pool room, volunteering, and they started a chess club, so they're teaching folks how to play chess, new ones, or how to get better. So that's been a really, we have about probably 30% are men who come into the senior center, and that's high for a lot of places around in the area. Okay, we're next step. So our goal is always to have our staff, our volunteer base, and our membership look like the diverse community population in the community. So that's our goal. Some of the things that we're doing to try to encourage that is partnering with the DEI committee just recently to try to get some partnering grants, some cultural council grants. We have this Wednesday, we have an event celebrating Black history that is a drumming circle, and that's open to ages 12 and up, and that's free. That's this Wednesday night from 6 to 8. We have had partnerships with the Chinese Bible Church, with the Lowell Catholic High School, with Valley Collaborative. We try to encourage folks from the LGBTQ plus community by having socials. We have 2 times a month, we have a LGBTQ social, and just recently started a lesbian queer women's meetup at the request of some of the residents. We had a pronoun workshop so people could learn a little bit about what's up with the pronouns people were saying. And so we wanted to give them an opportunity to just be in a space where they could ask respectful questions and learn. And so I think that was really helpful and valuable. What else do we have here? We have sensitivity training for all of our staff, for our drivers, our companions also, and we have LGBTQ training for all of our staff and DEI training through the state, because we have partnerships with the Department of Public Health and Executive Office of Elder Affairs, which is now Executive Office of Aging and Independence. So we did talk a little bit about, do we call our senior center a senior center? And what we came up with was that, well, what problem are we trying to solve? Like our parking lot is already full, our wait list, like we have lots of people in the building every day. And so there is still a stigma, though, for, and a lot of ageism. So we've had ageism workshops. We try to make sure that people understand a little bit more about like the value of seniors in the community all in all, and that we're just not bingo. So some of that is just communicating and doing things like this to let folks know a little bit more about what's happening there. Another accessibility feature at the senior center is just being open to people who can't afford a lot of other things. So they have limited incomes, and so we have many programs to help folks who would like to save a little bit of money or need to save a little bit of money. So we have fuel assistance help, we have SNAP food assistance, we have, right now our activities are free for 3 months. So January, February, and March, with the support of the Friends of the Senior Center. They're paying all of our instructor fees, and so the seniors don't have to pay for them for 3 months. And it's a great opportunity for people to try new things, or if they're already in the classes, to have a little bit of extra cash in their pockets, which everybody needs to pay grocery bills at this point. Most classes are $5 or $6 each. Our luncheon is $2.50, which is a donation-based thing. So if people cannot pay, we do not turn people away. That's seniors and disabled folks. But otherwise, if you're under 60, you're welcome to come for lunch, and it's $4.50, and it's a charge. We have a podiatrist. We have a free veterans breakfast every month. We've got free medical equipment to borrow. Free mental health support, grief counseling, Alzheimer's and dementia caregiver support group. All of these things are paid through our revolving funds and our budget that we get from you, mostly the revolving funds. And our social day program and our companion program are very reasonably priced so that caregivers can have a little bit of help. They're respite driven to help family members. We have a senior tax worker program to get people's tax bill lower. We've got free tax preparation for all ages through AARP. Thank you very much, our volunteers that come there. And we've got workshops and brochures about other financial resources available. So the other thing that we think about when we think about inclusion is people have differing abilities. So we have support for people with low vision, with people who are hard of hearing. We've got sound panels and more that we're working on right now. We've got wheelchair accessible transportation available to folks. We've got Meals on Wheels for homebound seniors. How much time do you have? I'll keep it quick. And movement classes for people with Parkinson's disease. And we have a program coming up this coming month for folks with, what do they call it? Low vision. So they'll be able to come and do an occupational therapist is coming in to give some support and some ideas to how to be independent. Our volunteer and work placement opportunities for disabled adults enriches our whole community and gives them an opportunity for a work placement, and it's really wonderful. So we work with some of the community groups in the area. We have a Buried in Treasures support group for decluttering. We have a technology support for those in need. We want to make sure that people are still getting information, even if they don't have computer access or if they don't prefer computer access. And then we also do a lot of printed materials. So we have our newsletter and we have the town manager's newsletter in print so that people can access the same information. We're working on acoustic panels right now for better sound absorption to make the whole building a little bit more accessible. So coming soon, we have this Wednesday our African-style drum circle and presentation open. That's 6 to 8, Wednesday, February 5th. We have women's role in the military, a lecture on March 10th coming up, and we've got a caregiver speaker series starting in the spring on Monday nights to expand some services for folks who are actually in work during the week. So thank you very much. I'm always looking for more ways to make it more inclusive, so if you have any ideas, you know where I am. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Very,
Thanks for your
very
support.
comprehensive, thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Debbie.
Have a great night.
Yeah.
Okay, so, Paul, here's why we're here tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Good evening. We're here basically to present my proposed fiscal year 2026 operating budget. As we know, in the provisions of the charter and the town bylaws require it to be submitted approximately 90 days before town meeting, which is at the end of April. Let me just sort of start out, and I'm not going to read text, but just sort of just put in context. We've known for quite some time, almost about a year, that this was going to be a challenging fiscal period. You may recall back last February, I sent out a report that I shared with this board, the Finance Committee, and the School Committee, looking ahead to a 3-year period about the challenges that were ahead of us. And basically, at that early date, we could see that we were challenged by inflation. Move forward to fall town meeting, the finance director, John Souza, who's obviously very involved with me in the presentation in preparation of the budget, and he's going to present the capital component of the budget later this evening, presented the update to fall town meeting. We then had an update after fall town meeting where it sort of gave an outlook of major issues. And then we had the tri-board meeting in December with the Select Board, School Committee, and Finance Committee, which I think is fair to assess was one of the most challenging or difficult tri-board meetings we've experienced in our recent years because of the fiscal constraints and tensions. At that time, at the tri-board meeting in December, we sort of gave our sense of what the landscape was looking like. Unfortunately, since that time, it only worsened. And I think the big message was the real driver on this inflation, but the big driver of inflation was healthcare inflation and benefits. We had known, because we reported basically back to you about 6 months ago, that Middlesex County Retirement had completed its 2-year required actuarial valuation, and that our retirement assessment was going to go up by over 8%. I think it was 8.4% this year. And then the second year would go up by 6.5%. And then we knew that the trends in healthcare, as we saw what was happening with the Stewart Hospital closure, what we were receiving from our reports on utilization and so forth, was healthcare inflation has been a real sticky issue. The early indications started at 10%, then it appeared to be 12%, and then, unfortunately, about 10 days ago, when the chair and I and others were in Boston for the Municipal Association Connect 351, which is the annual meeting of all cities and towns, which includes the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association, they presented the news that the trends in healthcare in terms of premiums were between 9.98% and 19.98%, the average being 14.8%, but that communities were rated upon their individual claims experience. And what was happening specific to Chelmsford, because I had spoken to our rep into that time, was that our claims were running at our premium level, and basically, which means that we're running a deficit. And in fact, the whole health plan consortium was running a deficit, as is the group Insurance Commission, which is the Commonwealth's consortium that deals with state employees and cities and towns who join the state consortium. How this works is you set rates in February, so we'll receive our actual rate by next week for the period that begins 4 months later in July 1st, and then runs the 12-month period till June 30th of the subsequent fiscal year. What has happened here, and has happened to the GIC and so forth, is the estimates for this year were under, and so the town and the plan and the GIC and others are running a deficit. So now you've got to set the rates for the new period, fiscal year period, beginning July 1, and they're setting the rates to break even. So in order to break even, you've got to absorb the deficit from the current year, and then you also have to forecast the increase for the upcoming year. And yes, the plans have reserves, to buffer them cash flow wise to the process. So that meant that our claims were greater than the median, which was 14.8, and we've been told it'll be closer to 17.5%. Why that matters is every 1% is over $130,000 to the town. We're roughly we're spending over $13 million for employees, and I'll get into the details. So that basically made the hole deeper. In the last 10 days, not only did we receive that, but the governor released her proposed state budget, Governor Healy's, the administration's state budget, and we actually received what she was proposing to fund for cities and towns. And that's the benchmark that we have at this point in time, because as we know, the legislature won't finish the process till July with the start of the fiscal year, and as we've known in recent years, it tends to go past July. But that's the sort of the foothold that we have, because the House will take up the budget in April, the Senate will take it up in May, it'll go to conference committee, hopefully it gets done in end of June, or they'll do a supplemental budget, and then they'll do the actual budget usually by the time the end of July before they recess. The governor's budget statewide, in terms of the base state budget, was up only 2.2%. So the governor proposed general government assistance to cities and towns at 2.2%. The other piece of state aid is Chapter 70, or educational funding, and what the governor proposed was compliance with the fifth of the 6th year of funding schedule for Chapter 70, the Student Opportunities Act. And once again, Chelmsford is in the position of being a minimum aid community. And what the governor announced is her proposal for minimum aid communities would be $75 per student. That also is about 2.8% of the situation of funding increase over the prior year. And then we heard last Friday, and I had been in touch with the Neshoba superintendent last week about how are we going with the Neshoba Tech assessment, because that's a multi-town, 9-community school district, vocational school district, and therefore we don't have full control of that because of the way the district agreement works. But in essence, in this case, because our enrollment was down, the district enrollment was up, our increase is basically almost level funded. It was like 0.44% or $13,000. So that was a good, favorable news to us, because we had thought it would be greater than that. And then, as instructed at the Tri-Board meeting, I had been in communication meetings. Finance Director John Sousa and I met with Dr. Lang a week ago today, basically bringing him the news that we had received on the health care. He brought us, unfortunately, unfavorable news in terms of out-of-district special ed tuitions increasing greater than he had forecast. And then by Tuesday morning, we settled on an allocation of funding. And tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock in the school committee room at the school administrative offices, he'll be revealing the details of his proposed school budget for the upcoming year. What we know is his forecast at the time of the Tri-Board meeting in December was they needed roughly $3.5 million to level staff the school operations. The end of the day, in this budget, he gets half of that. So he has to absorb $1.7 million of reductions from either reserves they have or operational aspects and staffing and so forth. And we'll hear the details of that tomorrow night at the school committee meeting. So that's what we came into. So basically, we finalized the process last Tuesday. Basically, Wednesday was the day of finalization, checking, rechecking, writing, form, and then Thursday the budget was released. And unfortunately, because of the fact that 76% of the town's revenue comes from the property tax, which has a base cap of 2.5%, we basically aren't able to maintain the level of services. And I think the best thing I can relate to is this is what our residents are going through. And really, even what our business partners in the community are going through. right? We hear and see, not only are they suffering from the increase in the property tax, but they're suffering from the increases, as we've discussed with our legislators, from utility costs. And we've seen now, particularly in the last month, the electricity costs and natural gas costs. Yes, it's been a colder month, but even aside from that, the rate increases in both supply and transmission, as well as grocery costs, insurance costs. And the reason we can relate to that is we have the same thing. If we go and hire an engineer or a contractor to do work, their rate increases are coming to us as well. And our utility costs as a community are going up. So we also realize that we can't turn to the residents and say, gee, during this time, can you also increase your property tax greater by an operational override? And we know Chelmsford's history in that has been very clear and telling. It was last attempted in 2008. And then we haven't had a successful override basically since 1991 for trash. So we're talking, 35 years. So that sort of sets the stage of where we're at. And then unfortunately, we had the painful separation of people that we work with on a daily basis. And it was very difficult in this building. And I have gone through every department in the wake of that and answered questions and tried to explain and provide a context of what's going on. It's a very difficult period because, like any organization and a small organization, it's a close-knit family of people, and it's been very trying. The sad part is this is not really a correction. This is more like a trend, right? There's no evidence that we can see at this time that inflation is going to abate both to the traditional levels that we've seen up until the pandemic, when your 2.5% increase was okay because inflation was running 2%. There is no expectation that healthcare costs are under control or will be soon. I don't think the increase, it certainly won't be 17.5% next year, but it's reasonable to assume it's going to be double digit. And it's reasonable to assume, we know the number for Middlesex retirement is 6.5%. And we can see by the Fed's action as recently as last week that inflation is still a wrestling bear because they won't cut interest rates. And then the whole uncertainty of what's going on out there, as we saw this weekend with, are we tariffing Canada and Mexico, and then today we're not, and just the volatility. So it's a very challenging time. We, by law, unlike the federal government, have to balance a state budget. And our budget gets submitted and approved by the state and verified before we can issue a tax bill. So that's the check and balance. We have to adopt the state budget, the state verifies it, and then not only do they approve the budget, they approve our property valuations and our tax rate. So that's the process. So we have no choice. We can't deficit spend. And we also know the consequences of that, because if you were to draw off reserves, then you're going to reduce the town's financial condition, and then you're going to incorporate greater interest rates for borrowing by a lower of the bond rating and so forth. And we did see that happen in 2007. And so again, drawing upon this with the knowledge and experience that we have, myself and John having worked together for 18 years, and Darlene also in accounting, and department heads who've been, in some cases, here longer than I, we sat with every department head and said, what's available? Like, what can we do to address this situation? And basically what we tried to do is, how can we mitigate the loss? So let me give you an example. We eliminated a position in the health department, a health inspector. That's an important position. We need 2 inspectors to make sure that we comply with the requirements to inspect every organization twice per year and make sure it's sanitary as well as address complaints. Why that position was eliminated was because when I spoke to the health director, she basically said, Paul, I might be able to help because this is a position that we may be eligible, we expect to be eligible for state funding, because recently, in the last 2 years, the state has adopted an initiative because of the concerns with the performance and workings of local boards of health, where they're providing grant funding. So therefore, that position was eliminated, but the expectation is that would be staffed by the state grant. And furthermore, the director said, in the event we have issues, she herself, as a previous inspector, and would step forward. So those are the type of decisions we made. And then same thing with the police department. We know, and we're having difficulties with mental health responses on fire and medical calls, as well as the calls over at the sheltering facility and just in general. And so Chief Spence in his budget had a staffing for a mental health clinician in his budget. That was eliminated. And again, the hope and expectation is that state grant funding will again be there to staff that going forward. And then similarly, we literally looked piece by piece, department by department, building the budget up. And then when it came into the Veterans Office, in speaking with the Veterans agent, we knew that the claims were down, the reimbursement levels were down. And so the sense was we'd have to return to the situation that it was up until about 4 years ago, where it would just be the Veterans agent as a sole, operator in that office, full-time. It's not desirous. We knew and lived the fact that Regina has worked hard for this community and worked hard to obtain that part-time position. And we also knew that that person was doing an excellent job, and I would put her anywhere. She's that good of an employee. But we have to do that. And then finally, the most dramatic one, and the one that's received the most coverage, was our community services coordinator, a position that I established a half dozen years ago, recognizing the need and trying to help those who fall through the cracks. But where we're going to turn to at this point is those other resources. You heard some from Deb Sirianni tonight, the mental health and other services they provide at the senior center. We know the Board of Health has resources to help, and they'll be the in-building resource that we'll turn to. So those are the decisions that we've had to make, in addition to the fact that the other issues are we're closing Sunday hours at the library once again, a situation we've had to do in the past. We're not going to have lifeguards at the town beaches. That doesn't feel great either, because nobody wants that call that something has happened at Hart Pond or Freeman Lake. It's just a bad situation. But then the question becomes, well, what's the alternative? Where else can you go? We know, you look with us, we're at core staffing levels. And later on, you'll see a slide that shows that. And so you can't cut the core because you have to function. You've got to be able to, no matter what we do as a government entity, we have to assess all the properties in conformance with state law because it gets reviewed. And in fact, this is the 5-year reval year. So that has to function. We have to, assess, not only assess, we have to tax and collect properties. That's the collector and treasury office. And obviously accounting, regardless of the town's fiscal situation, has to process all the bills for the school department, the town departments, and obviously have a clean audit. So you start looking around, little by little, IT. We got 2 IT people serving the whole general government of the town. You just go through the building. That's what we did. Go through the department. Cemetery, there's 4 people. You got a director, a support person in terms of part-time to help the director, and then you've got the people who are basically out there working in the cemetery for the burials and maintenance of the properties. Nothing we could do there. And we know because we've lived the experience of the Great Recession in 2008. We also experienced the 2012 when there were the years of the zeros, when in times when people couldn't sell their house for what their property was worth. And yes, I'm not saying the world is the same as it was 18 years ago, because the world is different. And the situation today is different, and the biggest difference is in the labor market. We have a labor shortage out there. So unlike when in the Great Recession, where everybody took zeros for pay increases, or in 2012, the years of zeros, because it was a recession and downturn, As you can see, that's not the situation today. We're seeing people, as we've seen in other communities with teacher strikes and so forth, who are basically a valued commodity, and they will move with their feet. We know, we saw that recently. We had an officer who we paid to go through 24 weeks of the police academy. Upon doing his field training, give us notice and saying, I'm moving on to another community for more money. We just know the climate's different. We're also at the bargaining table with our labor groups, and we know from other communities and Frank that if you don't pay a competitive wage, you're not going to be viable. It's going to affect your services. So we have to provide a market wage, which is what we are. We're a service organization. And therefore, our biggest cost of all this, particularly education, is on payroll. So that's the climate we deal with in moving through. We're not at the point, and I hope that we would never get to the point of the horror of closing a fire station again. We don't want to go there, and we're not there with this budget. Because you say, oh, there's always alternatives. Yeah, the alternatives are bad. And as we know on the general government side, the departments where the money is police, fire, and DPW. Okay? They all contribute to public safety in the town's operations. We know the issues, and we've studied them for years with the Fire Station Study Committee about inadequate staffing levels, the concerns over response time, which is why you don't want to close stations, and you want to have adequate safety. And there's needs, legitimate needs that haven't been funded in this budget, as you've seen in the presentation. Same thing on the police side. The type of calls, the nature of the calls, the mental health aspects and so forth are more challenging than ever. And we've been notified from our labor unions that, hey, look, we're concerned about staffing levels. And then on the DPW side, you say, oh, it's a big department, there's funding. The challenge with DPW is some of those departments are siloed with their own revenue sources and their own accounting systems. So yes, we have a sewer division, but the sewer division is solely operated and accounted for from revenues from sewer fees. So we can't use the sewer fees and go use that to balance the budget or raise sewer fees to get around 2.5. And the same thing with the stormwater. So you start pulling out the sewer and the stormwater, what's left in DPW is basically your administration, your engineering, and highway. And we did cut a highway employee. There wasn't a layoff there because there was a vacancy in that position, but that's gone. And then, as you know, over the last couple of years, his position did open up. I often didn't fill them. So when Steve Servin, our safety officer, passed, didn't fill the position. When Sue Roser, our health director, retired, Donna Greenwood, her assistant, was promoted to health director. I wouldn't approve of her hiring an assistant because I said to her at the time, and sadly it turned out to be true, I said, I'm not going to hire a person and then have to make a cut later on and have that person put out in the street. It's not, you don't do that to people in the hiring process. You know, hire them, they leave a position secured, and then all of a sudden, 9 months later, they're out because, and then the same thing, when our human resources director retired, our business development director applied for the position, to my surprise, and I remember talking to Jeannie and then talking to her afterwards. I said, why would you apply for this position? And she said, well, one, I'm interested in HR, but two is, I'm not sure that my position is going to be there. And so when I talked to Jen Melanson last Thursday, I said, Jen, in all honesty, Lisa, our HR director, if she was in that position today, she'd be leaving today with you. Not because of anything about her skills or her value or her contribution or what the benefit to the community is. It's that tough of a situation where we're down to the core. So that's sort of an overview of what we've gone through. I think what you're going to see in the year ahead is, and I've mentioned this at the last meeting, and you'll see it in the draft warrant next week, we've got to look at everything as a community. There's no sacred cows, and we've got to look at, you know, and we've done this as a board with our goals. You know, is it possible to raise additional fees? So yes, we're going to come in, we're going to raise dog license fees. Is it possible for us to, you know, look at combining services with other communities? And I can tell you that as of this afternoon, when I spoke to my peers in Westford and in Tewksbury, we will be advancing with a regional seal of weights and measures because NIMCOG was no longer able to provide the service. But this way, although you'll see it on our chart as an increase of 1 FTO, that's because we're the host community, but we'll be basically staffing 35% of that cost of that position, and then Tewksbury will pay 35% and Westford will pay 30%, because together it's more efficient than each community having a person, even on a part-time basis, and the equipment and training and everything that goes with it. So that's what we're doing. And then similarly, I know it's out there, but even the marijuana question is, you approve the question on the ballot in April, should the town allow for the sale of recreational marijuana? Not because people think it's a great thing to have in the community, but the fact is, it is in the communities that are around us, many of the communities that adjoin us, and are we leaving a revenue stream on the table that's probably $300,000+? Those are the questions. I think there's also some challenges, as we've heard in the process, about our zoning and so forth in terms of what's viable. Those are the things we got to look at in the year ahead and years ahead. And then I think the other thing you're going to see, quite frankly, because we saw it happen in Westford, as this plays out further, you're going to see even more dramatic cuts in education, because that's all that's left. I mean, obviously, we value education. It's 2/3 of our discretionary spending by the town. But as we saw in Westford last year, when the override failed and they had to balance their budget, that's where the cuts go. And I'm sad to say, I think that's probably where we're headed. Not only what Dr. Lang announces tomorrow night, but if the trend continues in the years ahead. And that's why when the governor comes forward and says, we want municipal reform to help cities and towns cope, well, she made that claim last year. It didn't happen. You saw she filed the legislation again this year. I think we've got to look at that again. I know the state house is not keen on new revenue sources or taxes, even at the local level, but even if that component isn't enacted, there's some other municipal reform things that could help cities and towns be more functional, so forth. So I appreciate your patience with listening, but I really wanted to put this into context. And what I'll try to do is go through the budget document. I know you can read, I know the public can read, and I'm not going to sit here and read the document to you, but I will go through some of the highlights so that those who haven't had a chance to read the situation. The bottom line is the budget's $168.4 million. That's what that was the benchmark that was established at the tri-board meeting. It fully utilizes the full levy limit of Proposition 2.5. And as I noted, it's a reduction in services, and we're going to explore grant opportunities to help mitigate the loss. Moving on to the next part is, again, we're utilizing all of our levy. The budget grows by 3.52%. Here's sort of a little bit more granular detail. The school budget's up 2.4%, or $1.77 million to $75.65 million. Neshoba Tech, as I mentioned earlier, only a $13,000 increase to just over $4 million. The general government operating departments, meaning the police, fire, highway, and so forth, that's up by 1.7%. So again, schools went up 2.4, the general government 1.7. And again, there's almost a 2 to 1 funding ratio. As you can see, school budget's $75.65 million, general government's $38.3 million. Our increase is less than that of the schools. Benefits and insurance, this is what I've been talking about, a $4 million increase of 12.4% overall. Our debt service decreases, which looks great on the surface level. We're now down by 1.5%, or $159,000 to $10.4 million. However, most of that is excluded debt. So our non-excluded debt actually increases by over 9.62%, or $686,000. So therefore, what looks like a decline in debt service actually is a budget constrainer, because our non-excluded debt, excluded means excluded from the Proposition 2.5. So when non-excluded debt gets funded, like the project for the fire stations or the previous DPW and so forth, when that debt is only approved and only funded in the amount for the debt service, and then when it's paid off, then you don't get to absorb it anywhere else. That's why it's called excluded debt. And then the assessments and overlay are basically state charges. And again, this is a summary of the list of positions that are in the current year's budget that aren't in next year's budget. As I mentioned, business development director, highway laborer, community services coordinator, assistant health director, health inspector, veteran service assistant, part-time accounting clerk, part-time staffing for clerical assistants in the clerk's office, and part-time facilities project coordinator at DPW facilities support. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Sunday hours at the library, the lifeguards at the beaches. We're going to eliminate one of the 2 household hazardous waste collections days. And we even got to the granular level of we're not going to print all copies of the town report to every, we bring those to town meeting, pass them out and everything. I guess we really don't need to do that in the year 2025. People can look at it online. And again, these are some of the things that were omitted. Again, there's legitimate requests and long-standing, meaning not just this year, for additional police officers. Our biggest complaint, as you know, aside from potholes, is probably traffic speed and traffic safety. We know from the fire station study the additional firefighters for staffing levels, as well as the lieutenant positions to increase operational safety. Again, we could use additional DPW laborers in the highway division to help improve the condition of the roads, sidewalks, and parklands. And then again, the safety specialist position is not available to improve workplace safety. So again, this is sort of, I want to harp on it again, $4 million, or 69% of the available new monies we have available to us get absorbed by the health insurance and retirement assessment. You can see the health insurance, $2 million to address the active employees. We provide insurance for 685 parties, subscribers, meaning they're the subscriber. It could be a family plan or an individual plan. So the 685 eligible employees, again, town and school. And again, the premium for that will increase to over $35,000. And the town funds 75% of that premium, or over $26,000. Now, of course, the employees aren't thrilled because their increase of their 25% is also going to go up by 17.5%. So in a case of if there's an individual employee who's on an HMO family plan, they're going to pay an extra $1,300 for their health insurance as their 25% contribution. So obviously they're dealing with that, and then clearly, and just let me put the health insurance in context. As I mentioned, we're at the benchmark, meaning the lowest that we can go under the state law unilaterally by the town. But you're not going to convince the employees to take higher deductibles, co-pays, or other modifications when they're already absorbing a higher premium increase. And obviously their pay increase can't keep pace with inflation. And because the fact that our premiums are based upon our claims experience, it's not like you can say, oh, well, forget Blue Cross, go find Tufts or another provider, because your claims are your claims. And the problem with the claims is that it's a societal issue in terms of higher drug utilization, higher medical care, higher costs, as we said earlier, the labor shortage in terms of nurses and so forth, as evidenced by what we see out there from Stewart and so forth. And so there's no panacea there, and each individual community is rated on its own. So Neshoba Tech, they're not having as big of a health insurance increase, and that's for this year. We don't know what'll happen next year with their claims, but also I think they have a different population of because they're again rated on their own situation. So that's the situation, and then we also insure 1,000 retirees with Medicare supplement plans. So we got to budget another $950,000 because the town pays 60% of that premium. So again, the people who are on those plans, they're going to absorb 40% of a 12% increase. People who are on generally retirees and on fixed incomes. And then I mentioned enough earlier about the Middlesex County Retirement System, the $13.1 million assessment, of which we know $12 million of that is to fund the unfunded pension liability that we've absorbed from previous generations that we've been trying to pay off. And by state law, we have to pay off by 2040. And the current schedule is to pay it off by 2036. So basically, just over 10 years. And that funding level, as we know from that Middlesex report, is we're just over 53% or so. So it's not like, oh, can't Middlesex do something about this? No, we're going to see significant increases almost up until, and I would expect until the end of this situation, of the final payoff. Again, not to harp on it, but again, we're constrained since 3/4 of our revenue comes from the property tax. That's not the case for cities like Lowell or Lawrence and so forth. The state increase, again, we've been discussed this in detail, I'm not going to go through it, but how we're being realistic with local receipts and so forth. Again, I've mentioned about the $75 per student, the 2.62% in Chapter 70 funding. This is the historic level, so there's data here that shows you that, aside from the extraordinary year of 2024, when they brought us into full compliance with the formula, we've been a minimum community, and that's all we expect to see. There's also a capital improvement plan. What the town can't do and hasn't done, we've made level funding in our capital budget. Out of a $168 million budget, we're funding $6 million of capital infrastructure for 22 infrastructure projects. And John Souza is going to describe those later this evening. And as I mentioned earlier, sewer, stormwater, PEG access, which is covering this meeting, ice rink and golf course go through standalone enterprise funds. And as you can see there, it's not great news either. The sewer enterprise budget increases by 5.63%. Most of that's driven by the $200,000 increase to the Lowell Regional Wastewater Facility that treats our effluent. So you can see out of that $6.43 million, 2.4 of that goes to the wastewater plant in Lowell. It has nothing to do with what we do in terms of pump stations and operations in Chelmsford. Stormwater budget increases by 6.5% to $2 million. PEG access, again, that comes from the revenues from the cable surcharges for cable television. Their budgeting, basically a nominal increase of 1.1%. And then the forum and the golf course are level funded respectively. So again, I'm not going to do the conclusion. I've been doing enough of a soliloquy, but the other thing I just point out is this isn't just a Chelmsford problem. This is a problem that municipalities across the state and obviously across the country and so forth are dealing with. And again, I think we have a partner with the state since we're a creature of the state, and hopefully they will help us during this critical time to the extent possible. Again, our priorities have been strong standing for years. It's education, it's public safety, it's infrastructure, public health and human services. This is detailed in terms of the line items. You can see municipal administration, we actually have a reduction there. The ones that are bold show you where's the money go. It goes to, of the $5.7 million of budget line item changes, obviously the bigs that jump out to you, $1.77 million to the schools, $436 for public safety, a cut in community services, notably the health department and community services coordinator, and then benefits and insurance up 12%, as we talked about, $4 million, and then again our nominal debt service. And the asterisk shouldn't be missed. This does not include funding for unresolved collective bargaining agreements for public safety and library employees. So, what does that mean? That means that, as I say in the intro, this budget is not final. When those contracts come in, and we don't know when they're going to be resolved, they'll have to be funded. But a couple other things will change by then. We'll know final state aid numbers. We'll also know final growth numbers for the assessors who are doing the reval. And so I guess it's a long-winded way of saying that's how I envision that's going to be funded, is by these uncertainties. And hopefully they break in our favor. If not, then we'll have to come with a bridge to deal with that. That's the situation we're in. So this isn't an overly conservative budget where we've sort of not allowing for contingencies that may break our way. We're expecting that on the historic trends that they break our way, that'll allow us to fund the contracts. Unfortunately, we've seen situations where contracts have taken multiple years to be funded and so forth. Again, on the revenue side, a $5.6 million increase. Again, based, so we're slightly in a nominal deficit, but within the margin of error. I often provide this of the 5-year expenditure comparison to show you, well, where's the money been going over time? And the next slide will be at 10 years. It goes to where the priorities of the community are and where the bulk of the operations of the are. Schools, 14 million over 5 years. Public safety, DPW, benefits and insurance, up 41% in 5 years. Clearly, that's not sustainable. We wonder, and we were just talking about this in Boston at the conference, at what point does it collapse, right? In terms of health insurance. But again, in the reality of today, 41% in 5 years. Fortunately, our debt service is declining, but obviously that's precursor because the fire station has not been added to that. And when the town does consider a school project, probably within 2 years from now, that will obviously change that dynamic, in a big way. Again, 10-year comparison, you see the same things in bold where the big changes are dollar-wise and percentage-wise. Facilities, we've got an aged facilities of the town. All of our buildings are 10 years older. We haven't obviously built a new building other than the fire station and DPW in that period. But our schools are our largest square footage, and we know our school buildings are 50 to 60 plus years old. And then benefits and insurance over 10 years, up over 79%. Again, the proposed line item that I'm proposing is 1.7 million, 7 million for the schools. As I mentioned earlier, the level service request was double that, 3.5 million. This is historically how we funded the schools, so this 2.4% obviously pales in comparison to the 4.5% last year, and what they've had in recent years. And in terms of the funding, in terms of what the state requirement is, the most recent year that we have, which is our current year, budgeted versus required, we're 31% over net school spending, which is the amount the state mandates we have to spend on education. When we were at Neshoba Tech last Friday morning, the question was asked, well, what's the percentage of Neshoba Tech? How are they funding over net school spending requirement? And the answer was $1. So the Neshoba Tech is running at net school spending requirements. And you can see what's happening is the net school spending requirement for the current year is $67 million. For next year, it'd be up over $3 million to $70, based on the governor's proposed budget. That's why you hear communities like Drake and other places that are at net school spending saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't have the revenue from Chapter 70, education aid, and the other sources to meet the net school spending requirements. That's how challenging it is. Again, to put it into context, the last data we have, which is 2 fiscal years ago, it's costing almost $18,000 to educate a child in the Chelmsford Public Schools. That means if you look at any 22-student classroom, it's costing you almost $400,000 for the school year. Here's the enrollment for the Chelmsford Public Schools. We're about the same enrollment as we were a decade ago at almost 5,100 students. You can see there's been growth in teachers over that period, but not so much in recent years. You see how that's waned. Average class size, you see the growth in class size. The most recent data we have is 18.8, which again, is around where we were 10 years ago, and you can see how that has fluctuated from 17.7 to 19.1 over that period. This is the drivers that we saw in December when we met with the school committee and finance committee of the school department, the 3.5 that I've mentioned repeatedly tonight, and the funding proposal is 1.7 of that, which leaves them with 1.75 to absorb. Neshoba Tech, I mentioned it earlier, it's, again, a nominal increase. And again, it's driven by the fact that our enrollment decreased by 8 students when the district's enrollment increased by 7. We're, as the largest sending member to Neshoba Tech, we fund, at this point, we're assessed and fund and represent 27.5% of the enrollment at Neshoba Tech. And you can see how that's, we're over 200 students per year. So roughly 50 students per class, grade level for the 9 through 12. You can see it's costing, the most recent data of 2 years ago, it's costing almost $22,500. So it's likely today it's over $23,500 to educate a child in the vocational schools. And I think it puts it into perspective because people know what it costs to send a child to college or what their tax bill is in town. And again, the average cost per pupil expenditure is $23,000 plus or minus for vocational high school student. Why the Chelmsford schools is lesser is because you have elementary students, and that pulls it down in terms of your overall, if you see that with whole regional school districts. Again, the Neshoba Tech Drive, as you heard back in December, same as the Chelmsford schools and everyone else, contractual increases, special education, staffing, services, and transportation. They are building maintenance and capital projects, the cost of technical material programs and equipment, and they're increasing their vendor contracts and fixed costs. Again, it provides we're still at 69 full-time public safety. You can see they're responding to over 36,000 calls, of which property checks are about 43% of those, or 16,000. Same thing on the fire, at 63.5 full-time employees level staffing. We staff at 11 minimum per shift, so it's 13 down to 11, and therefore if people are on vacation or sick or injured, that's 11 is really tight, and we've had instances in maybe once a month or so where we have to close the station for a period of time because we don't have employees available to work. The call volume, as you can see, for the fire is over 6,300 calls in the calendar year that we just finished, and of those, 68% of them are medical calls, which obviously require a timely response, which is the whole basis of how the town has historically kept 5 stations open, is you want to be able to get to the scene to either assess for a fire or provide medical assistance as soon as possible, and that's why the police respond, as well as the private ambulance. Again, for employee compensation, for those without the contract settlements, it's roughly $100,000. Again, we've gone over the retiree and health insurance. This is a graphical illustration of the subscribers. So basically, if we're here 10 years ago, we go from 610 employees on health insurance to now 679, and we went from 857 retirees to 992, or almost 1,000. One is, the number of retirees grows because of longevity and so forth of people's lifespan. And then employees, people move in and out based upon if they have a spouse and available coverage for a spouse and so forth. I've talked about the premium. I'm going to do that again. I've talked about the Middlesex, the $116 million unfunded pension liability. And as I said here, this is 26. Again, we have the data for 27, so we know that 860,000 we're going to need next year, but for this year we need just over $1 million. And we know of that $13.3 million assessment, 11.3 of it is for the unfunded payment on the unfunded pension liability, because our normal cost is only $2 million. Solid waste and recycling, again, contractual increases for the haulers and the tipping go up by an inflation factor, so we have to factor in $114,000 for collection and increase. Medicare, your Medicare taxes are based on your payroll. We're anticipating a 5%, $62,000. Again, we've talked about our debt service. Again, right now it's in a great position, almost be fully repaid in the next 10 years, but we know things are coming on that. And again, the decrease of excluded debt service is $834,000, or 75% decline in that to, basically $300,000 because of the reduction of the sewer project. Because we know that the latter phase of the sewer project are paid for from betterments and the sewer assessment fee. But again, it doesn't provide any relief in our operating budget. So again, you can see $273,000. Clearly, you've seen that fall over time. The non-excluded is the other story. It's up, as I mentioned earlier, $7.8 million for the town's capital investment plans. This is a chart of the number of full-time employees on the general government and school department. It's a 20-year perspective. So you can see in 20 years, there's only been 1.6 or 3.4% increase in general government employees. And in 5 years, we've added 4 employees, or 1.6%. So this, I don't want there to be any notions out there in the community that we just hire people and we're just bloated and don't know, what we're doing in terms of how to run an organization. I don't have the final school numbers, and we'll, as the time of preparing this, you can see obviously growth there from 695 in '06 to over 800 in the current fiscal year. And again, here's the detail on the general government employees. So I gave you not only this year and what next year's is, but then again, a look back 20 years ago. And you can see, I don't want to bore you with excruciating detail, but the executive office, which is basically the town manager's office and HR, 5 people, 3 people, myself, 2 assistants, and then 2 HR. We're at core. And in fact, I know that if you go to other communities and look at the staffing in the managers and select board's office, nobody is running at 3 people. I know that for a fact. Again, finance department, still at the historic level of 14. That's basically assessors, treasurer, collector, and accounting. That's core. Same thing with town clerk, 4 people. And, 20 years ago it was 3.5, but we know the challenges from the mail-in voter registration, all the other things, that's core because of the workload is increased on that. Planning and development, 3 people, a planner, a conservation agent, and a staff person. For a town of Chelmsford size, 36,000 people. That says enough in itself. Again, police, same level as 20 years ago. Fire, up slightly. Again, why it goes up by 4 is it's an additional person per deployments. There's 4 deployments that staff 24/7. And that actually came out of an arbitration order where we were ordered to increase by 1 person per deployment. Inspections, again, 4 to 5 plus. Why you see the +1, that's that zero and weights measures position that I talked about earlier. So even though it looks like a +1, it's really level because the service was paid for and from the revolving fund through NIMCOG. Now we've had to absorb it because NIMCOG no longer provides it, and we're the host community. So again, that's why, but anyway, it is what it is. DPW engineering, 6 people, pretty what we were 20 years ago. Highway, roughly the same level as we cut 1 this year from last year, but roughly where we were 20 years ago. There was no facilities department 20 years ago. You remember there was the pilot where the town merged with school facilities. So again, that's why but it does show you we're at 17.5, and we know how stretched they are maintaining all the school buildings and town buildings. Basically what happened when that conversion came over, the employees came to the DPW from the schools, combined operation. Sewer enterprise, again, standalone level staffed. Stormwater, again, there was no stormwater back in 2006 because of the mandates from the federal and state government. We're level staffing that. That's why that was created. Parks is 0. It got absorbed into highway and grounds. Public buildings, we used to have 2 that got absorbed into the facilities. So right now we have a half, which is basically the night attendance. DPW recycling solid waste, still a half position. Cemetery, you can see level staffing from 20 years ago and this year. Health and community services, you saw we had ramped it up, and then you saw the cuts for this year. Recreation, we used to have a limited recreation department that was cut over 15 years ago, the 0. Health, we talked about that, the 2-position reduction, and the inspector and the assistant position. And then the library is level staffed essentially and slightly below where they were 20 years ago. And we know the library's activities and volume has not diminished. Again, you've seen the budget drivers. We've talked about the revenue sources. Again, we look at revenue comparisons over 5 years to get a sense. Again, you see how the property tax is over 76%. And what the increases in aid over that period, the same for 10 years. This is our 5.1 in new levy capacity. The 2.5% is the mathematical increase from the prior year base levy, and then the estimated $2 million of new growth, which includes the first phase and component of the old UMass West campus, which we believe units will be occupied by this June 30th. So that's built into that number. That's why you can say, well, why is it $2 million when in recent years you've only been 1.5? It's because we project $1 million increase from that project when it's all done, $500,000 this year, $500,000 next year, and reval, we'll see where we are. Again, the 8820 average single-family tax bill, obviously it goes, as you can see from our whole presentation, when you see the Chelmsford Public Schools at 45% or 4,000 of that, obviously that doesn't include the debt service and benefits and insurance that accompanies the schools. If you factor that in, you're closer to 60%.
So they're included in the 19.7?
Yes, they're in the 19.7 is benefits and insurance. It's roughly 2 to 1. If you really want to get it, we've looked at this on the town side in terms of active employees. So that's where you get higher, and then you start factoring in it. So again, the other issue is how it falls to the residential taxpayer, because we know the residential residential property values are increasing at a greater percentage than commercial. So if we went back, go 5 years, we've lost 2%, meaning residents have picked up over 2% and commercial has lost. And that's because home values and residential values have appreciated greater than commercial, and we're required by the state to assess that fair market value, and they test it with actual data. The only good news is, there's no good news, but it gives a matter of perspective, is there's the growth in the average single-family tax bill. Again, it's increased by 19.8% or $1,458 in 5 years. That's obviously higher than the compounding of 2.5% over 5 years of 13%. It's again because of the increase in residential values versus commercial. The thing that I would note is we rank currently 84th in highest single-family average tax bill across the state, which is the one metric the state gives us in their data. One being the highest, so the town of Weston is one, and then you go to Dover, Sherburne, Carlisle, and so forth. The top, we're 84. Last year we were 79, and if you go back to 2020, we were as high as 68, and if you go back to 2007, we were 61. So yes, taxes are going up in Chelmsford. They're going up everywhere. I don't know where you escape it, but that's where we stand today in Chelmsford. We've fallen to 84 as opposed to the high 70s where we were in recent years, which means other communities are increasing their taxes either from value appreciation and or overrides and debt exclusions. Here's more granular data for where we are with Billerica, Drake, Tewksbury, and Westford, our nearest communities. And you can see, again, it varies, but if you look over the 3-year period, we're not out of line in terms of the increases, and you can see how they would fluctuate. This year, Billerica had a 6.23% increase in their average single-family bill. Ours was only just under 3%. But yet last year we were 4, they were 3.89. You can see Billerica obviously has had a higher growth in their tax bill in the last 3 years than Chelmsford. Drake is obviously less. Tewksbury, very similar, and Westford. And obviously the dollar amount, the average single-family bill in Westford this year is $10,730, whereas we're more similar to Tewksbury. And then they do it as a percentage of income. Anyway, again, state aid, we've talked about this, the big components, general government aid, Chapter 70. Again, the general component aid's up 2.2%. The Chapter 70, again, the $75 per student. And then why it goes up 2.62 is you get other assistance in terms of charter tuition reimbursement, school choice tuition. School choice tuition doesn't go to the town, it goes to the school department. Same thing with library aid, it goes directly to the library, and so forth. There's the fact that I was mentioning about the decline in veterans exemptions and so forth. Local receipts, again, our biggest ones are motor vehicle excise, which is roughly half of it. Permits, Second biggest, 1.7 million. And then obviously we look at meals tax. We project we'll have almost $1 million in meals tax. And the lodging tax of 575. You can see how that has grown from 400 level prior to the pandemic to 575. Obviously, there's a concern that if the state does follow through with its intent to pull the people out of the hotels, that revenue is going to fall. We don't know when that's going to happen, but we know the occupancy of the hotels isn't the same when they're not being used for sheltering. So that's obviously a bit of a uncertain number. Available funds, again, just the offsets and such that go from the enterprise funds. Again, the big thing is inflation, 3.1% through November. The big killer was 7% in 2022. You can see where we were in earlier years, 1.6, 1.5, 1.9, occasional year of 3.3, 2.5. But you start looking at the recent years, and that's where you start people talking about the 20% inflation over 5 years and so forth. So that's it in a nutshell. I don't know if you want to hear John present the capital plan and then take questions, or if you want to stop on the operational budget at this point. It's whatever you prefer.
Why don't we just take questions now on the operational budget, if anybody has any? How about you, Erin? You have any questions for Paul on this budget?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. George?
Really, I think we had a pretty good idea what we're going to see.
Yeah.
We had the figures.
Thank you.
It is what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Virginia, anything? Okay.
No.
Okay.
All right, thank you. John, do you want to come up and present the capital?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Town Manager Cohen. Just to present you with an overview of the FY26 capital plan. This slide, you may recall from the tri-board meeting back in December, this just shows all of the breakout by functional area for all the different, projects. And you may recall that the Capital Planning Committee voted to recommend 19 projects totaling just over $5.96 million. The next slide shows a financing summary. So as we discussed back in December, we have a little over 27,000 recaptured funds, which come from prior year projects that were funded. These are remaining balances after the projects are completed, so we can recapture those. And so that leaves just about $5.94 million that will be funded through municipal bonds. And then moving into the areas, just to give you a better look at all of these projects. First in community services is our senior center. This project for $170,000 is the second phase to replace the flooring tile there. The flooring tile is over 30 years old and is in need of repair. The next three projects involve public libraries. So the first project is a repaving of the Adams Library lot. It's the current lot. Even though many of us think of the library as relatively new, it is over 20 years old, and there's been problems with the curb and the pavement. And I did want to point out for this project and a pavement project for the police station, Public Works Director Clancy was able to present that we could save $50,000 by doing this paving project at the same time as the police station parking lot, just due to mobilization and economies of scale, things like that. So that would have been a higher price tag without that. The next project involves a computer replacement. As you can imagine, in this age, the library uses a number of computers, and they try to replace them on roughly a 4 to 5 year life cycle. So this funds $60,000 to replace computers for staff and patrons at both Adams and McKay, with older units being repurposed to less intensive computing applications wherever possible. And then the next project at Adams Library involves, this is the second phase of the HVAC system replacement. You may recall from last year that the HVAC system at Adams is at the end of its useful life, and so this is the next phase. And as was discussed at capital planning meetings, there will be another phase to this, but this funds $450,000 for the second phase of this system replacement. And then we move into the public safety area. $405,000 is budgeted to repave the rear parking lot behind the police station. I won't go into a lot of detail there just due to time, but the same thing here. This would have been $25,000 higher without the savings of doing both projects together. And then the project for the fire department involves a command staff vehicle replacement for just under $112,000. This is a mobile vehicle. It serves as the command post for the officer in charge at a scene and carries a lot of specialized equipment. And then we move into public works. So we have your traditional infrastructure projects that we often fund every year. Sidewalk improvements for $375,000 that will be based on the sidewalk assessment and master plan. And then $425,000 budgeted for roadway improvements, which are also based on the pavement management database that the DPW tracks and updates. So those two together combined for $800,000. There's some equipment that I just want to touch on. $130,000 is budgeted to replace an older mini excavator that the Highway Division uses for a number of projects in town. And the next piece of equipment is an older sidewalk snow clearing unit. You can see it's a 2003. This costs $210,000. This will be used not only for snow clearing, but the new piece of equipment that will be outfitted so it could be used for other uses on the sidewalk. And then the next two vehicles involve municipal facilities, and you'll see that this is replacing an older, lighter-duty Chevy Colorado. This one and the next one, I just wanted to explain for a moment. The reason that you see DPW upgrading from lighter-duty vehicles to 3/4-ton vehicles that can have a snowplow is we've all read in recent years that fewer and fewer contractors, unfortunately, are interested in plowing for town DPW, not just in Chelmsford, but in surrounding towns. So this is going to give Public Works more flexibility because they can have a municipal facilities employee or Public Works use these trucks, the new trucks, to actually plow snow, where the older vehicles that are being replaced are not capable of, they're not heavy duty enough to have a plow. Then we move into next under municipal facilities. There's $150,000 budgeted for Americans with Disability Act improvements at parks, playgrounds, and open spaces. And you can see, as the Public Works Director discussed, these will be based on when the town's open space and recreation master plan, the recommendations that come out of that report will guide which projects will be funded for the $150,000. And then there's one project here that involves this building. $180,000 is budgeted to renovate between 2 to 4 restrooms under the first phase, just to replace aging restrooms with plumbing fixtures that may not be in the best of condition, as well as partitions, floors, things of that nature. Then we transition to school facilities. So the first one, you can see the cost is just over $877,000. This project improves the security at the entryways to 4 elementary schools: Byam, Center, Harrington, and South Row. It also improves the entryway security at Parker Middle School, and it also provides for the renovation of a stairwell at Chelmsford High School to provide better emergency egress so you don't have bottlenecking, so to speak. So if there was an emergency event, you want the students to be able to exit the building as quickly as possible, and that's the reason for that. The secure entryway project will be based on the project that has been completed at McCarthy Middle School. Same type of thing. You see that it will have a containment area, better secure access, have a checkpoint so that visitors to the school can be will be able to have to be checked in, and you can have containment of someone if needed. The next project involves Center Elementary School. It involves the partial roof replacement for $130,000. You can see that it's this is a section of Center School that has an asphalt shingle roof. The roof's 25 years old and has beyond its useful life. The next school project involves the replacement of a water heater and mixing valve at South Row School at a cost of $60,000. And the goal here is to replace this before you would have a catastrophic failure. So that's the reason for that. Then this project may sound familiar. This is the second phase. This is a partial roof replacement for $1 million at McCarthy Middle School. The current roof is 23 years old. It is beyond its useful life. And right now in this year's capital plan, fiscal year 25, you may recall that we funded the design of this. So this is the first phase of the actual roof replacement. There will be a second phase just because McCarthy is such a large school. The roof area, it could not all be funded in 1 year. So this will also allow it to be phased. And then the final school project involves a boiler replacement at McCarthy Middle School for $700,000. And you can see this project funds the replacement of 4 existing boilers that are approaching their end of their useful life. So that concludes the FY26 capital plan. As we know from past years, the next step in the process will be consideration by town meeting representatives in April. And then if town meeting approves this, then in June, early July, municipal bonds will be issued to finance this work. And then the last slide is just the summary of all of the capital improvements that you normally see for town meeting in the Finance Committee booklet.
Okay, any questions for John about the capital plan?
No.
Okay, Aaron, okay, everybody's shaking their head. Thank you
All right,
very much, John.
thank
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
One appointment.
Okay,
I'm seeking the board's confirmation to the appointment of the Town Hall Advisory Committee, Donna DeWitt. That's for an unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2026.
So- I'll make a motion to.
okay.
I'll make a motion to accept the manager's appointment.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll have to do a roll call vote. Aaron?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm aye. 0, thank you. We do have a set of minutes.
When they put your comments in, I think they took out a couple of mine. So it's just minor. In the attendance list, under school committee, the remote next to Diana's name should be stricken. She was there in person. And after Jay Lang, I added Joanna Johnson Collins, who's the finance director. She was also at that meeting in person.
Okay. And Susan McKinnon happened to review these minutes, and she noted that under the school committee, it lists her as she is. It lists Maria Santos as vice chair, but on both votes, we took 2 votes that day. One to set on page 4, to set the funding level at 168.4, and in the vote, it mentions Susan McKinnon being vice chair, and she is not. And then on the motion to adjourn, the same thing. It lists her as vice chair, and she is not. So if we could just have her listed as a school committee member.
Yeah.
So with those edits,
I'll make a motion to approve the December 9th, 2024 tri-board minutes as amended.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second, so we will roll call vote. Aaron?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm aye. Thank you.
Do you want my changes?
Sure, yeah, I'll get that.
And you got the ones that I mentioned. All right. If that is it, we'll take another motion.
It's 7:34. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Excuse me, are we not allowed to make a comment?
Not at this meeting. No, it's not on the agenda.
When are we allowed to make a comment?
If it's on the agenda, you can make a comment if we have a general comment. But it's not on tonight's agenda.
Okay, how do I make it on the agenda? How do we make that?
Can you
going
ask us about this later,
No, not
after we
really.
adjourn?
No.
After we adjourn.
It's a public meeting, and I'm a member of the community. I'd like to know when I can comment.
It's not on the agenda to even talk about that, so we will talk with you publicly about how you can get on the agenda, or how you can talk at the general public input session of the agenda, at the next meeting. So we have a motion to adjourn,
Second.
and a second. So we'll do a roll call vote. Aaron?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm aye. 4-0. Thank you.